Hello, I'm Christina, and I'm here with Martina, and we're your hosts. We are your podcast hosts for Everyday Ordinary Extraordinary Men. We are deep divers and avid students of life and powerful facilitators for healing. In real life, I'm an intuitive healer who loves to blend massage therapy and energy work to provide customized, holistic services.
And I'm a life coach specializing in parent and women empowerment, and I'm also a sound healer. And both of us love to incorporate crystals, essential oils, angelic Reiki, intuitive guidance into our work.
So here's the context. Most humans have a lot of preconceived notions and stereotypes about gender. For example, men are tough, silent, and forceful, while women could be chatty, manipulative, and emotional. But in doing that, we put people in a box and often forget to see beyond those labels. And if someone's not fitting the mold, we might call them a tomboy or a sissy. And those and similar labels often cause discord. But what would a world look like where we can go beyond our preconceived notions and understand that we are so much more than our gender? That we humans are strong and soft and gentle, deep and powerful, tough, fierce, and open. That qualities are not specific to gender, that we all have all qualities available to express. What would a world look like where we are all free to be who we choose to be and express all of our emotions? When we allow ourselves to express the so called masculine and feminine qualities within ourselves, we set ourselves free. When we allow others to do the same, when we accept all of them, we create synergy, peace, and harmony. Today, we are really happy to welcome to the podcast Dr. Blake Brandis. He's a TEDx speaker, America's Got Talent performer, and founder of the personal development company Motivational Millennial. He has a PhD in hip hop and global youth cultures, and he has spoken to over 500,000 students, parents, and educators around the world. Blake, welcome to the podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you so much, Christina and Martina. My name is Blake. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And yes, as you mentioned, I have the privilege of talking about the idea of the growth mindset, a message of hope for students in elementary school, middle school, high school, as well as their teachers and their families. And you all may be familiar with the growth mindset there, I'm assuming, based on all your work. But for those who aren't too familiar, it was popularized by Dr. Carol Dweck in 2006 with her book Mindset, and really talks about neuroplasticity, how our brains can grow, we can improve our skills, not just at school, not just at work, but also some of these social emotional skills that you were describing earlier, and understanding ourselves and who we currently are and who we can become. And so one of my core messages is the power of yet, which if you're watching this in video form, I'm wearing a hat and a shirt that says the power of yet on it. This is sort of my core message, which is if there's something in your life that you don't like the way it is, it might not have to be that way forever. And maybe it just isn't where you want it to be yet. So often, we catch ourselves saying, I can't do this, or I'm not good at this, or I don't understand this. And adding the word yet to the end, I found to be a really great shortcut to just saying, I don't understand this yet. I can't do this yet. I'm not good at this yet. So ultimately, my mission in life is to bring music and hope to people all across the world. And I'm really grateful to have found an avenue to do that that is fun and also a business. So that's a little introduction.
I love it.
I love that. Yet, that's something that I use quite often. That just saying, well, I don't know how to do it yet, doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it. It just adds that, like there's the finality if we say, I don't know how to do that. But if we add that yet, it just opens it up to possibilities. It's really cool. Beautiful. Beautiful. Um, there's something else you said. Oops, it just went away. So
Sure
um,
thing.
if we really knew you, if we really knew you, what would we know about you?
Mm. I am a giant lighthouse of love.
Mm.
and I appreciate the ways you're exploring gender identities and gender expectations because I think, I grew up in rural North Carolina, and growing up, it was very kind of typical gender roles and gender expectations. Like you said, boys are tough, boys play sports. Um, but to be interested in reading, in creativity, was not seen as a traditionally masculine pursuit. And so, as someone who loved reading and science fiction and fantasy and um, poetry, music, I often felt pretty different growing up. And I was really grateful when I was in seventh grade. There was something called the Talent Identification Program, which sounds a little grandiose, but basically you just took the pre-SAT, the PSAT, and if you did well enough, you got invited to a summer camp at Duke University or Davidson University in North Carolina. And so I went to Davidson. I ended up studying Latin and philosophy. But the best part about it was that I got to be around other kids, especially other boys, who were interested in learning, interested in reading, interested in having deep conversations. And one of the reasons I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and the incredible work you're doing with this podcast specifically is I think we need more examples so people can see there are alternative ways of being, and not just ones where like you can do it, but it's going to be really difficult and you're not going to have a community. But like, no, you can be who you want to be and find other people who love and cherish and celebrate you for who you are. So that's one of the reasons I really was grateful when you all reached out.
But that just makes our heart really happy, because that's the whole purpose, right? To just make people be like, oh, there's people, I could find people who are like-minded, and I don't have to try to fit into the people that are around me. I can actually find my tribe. They're out there. I just have to go out and create it, right? Like be like, oh, I like this. Who wants to join me?
Yeah.
I
And
think that's it, Christina, right? When we start talking about it, we will find people that's like, oh, I do that too. Oh, wow, really? I'm so happy, right? And that's beautiful that you were sharing that you found that, you know, oh, it's normal, right? Rather than, oh, I'm bad, I'm different,
Yeah, and also who we are can change when we're around different people. Like we can grow and learn different ways of being. And an example that comes to mind is when I first moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. I'd been in New York for 5 years, and my wife got a job out in Oakland, so we moved to Berkeley. And once we got there, I'd been doing a lot of business stuff, and so I soon joined an entrepreneurial mastermind, with a group of other entrepreneurs who were doing work in education and facilitation. And the first meeting, I thought I was going to be casual when I show up in my like khaki pants and just like a button down shirt. I wasn't wearing a suit, I thought like that was casual. I get there, no one's wearing shoes. There's like dance breaks every 15 minutes. They're just all like sitting in the burning sage. But like these people also have multi-million dollar businesses. And I was like, wait a second. So many of the assumptions I have about there's one way to be successful, there's one way to be a business person, there's one way to be in a group mastermind environment. All my assumptions started falling away. And I was like, oh yeah, not only is this different, I so appreciate the ways it is more holistic. It brings more of our bodies into the conversation, not just our minds and our histories.
Mm, I love that. I love two things about that. A, just that perspective, right? That like, oh, success doesn't have to look one way, right? But that I also love that this group incorporated the body and the whole mind-body connection into it. So that's really right on. You found a really cool tribe.
Yes, absolutely.
So how does one get to, you said PhD in hip hop? How does someone get to that? I mean, that's a conversation starter just in itself, right?
Totally. So, growing up, in rural North Carolina. I loved hip hop, but I was a very nerdy, awkward kid. And I was like, I can listen to rap music, but there's no way I could ever rap or beatbox or anything like that. Until one day at high school, I heard this commotion over by the lunch tables in the cafeteria. And I went over to see what it was, and a group of people had formed something called a cipher. And a cipher is basically like a rap circle. So one person's usually beatboxing, and for our listeners who might not be too familiar with beatboxing, it's where you make drum sounds with your mouth, and it might sound a little something like. And so, people took turns rapping about who they were and what they loved to do. And I thought this was amazing. But again, not a rapper. I love poetry growing up, but I was definitely not a rapper. But one day I was hanging out in the cipher, and one of the guys standing next to me, amazing rapper at our school. His name was Cedric, and he was a football player, very cool dude. And he turned to me after he finished rapping. He said, "Blake, go." And I was like, "You want me to leave? Like, go?" He's like, "No, no, no, Blake, rap." And so I started rapping, and it was super goofy. And nevertheless, he could have been like, "Whoa, you are so terrible and should stop." But instead, afterwards, he was like, "You're the most unusual rapper I've ever heard, but you clearly are really into hip hop, so I think you should keep going." And it was so nice of him to be kind to me. It could have been so easy for him to be like, "Whoa, you are terrible and should stop." But he said, keep going. And because this one person, one time, who I barely knew, encouraged me, I just kept going. I started recording songs. I started teaching myself how to produce music. I'm actually speaking to you from now my music studio in San Jose, California. I ended up becoming a professional music producer and artist manager in the music industry for 10 years. And yeah, as you mentioned, was eventually on America's Got Talent. So the route to the PhD was that I was honestly tired of writing essays in school. And one day, just kind of as a joke, I asked my teacher if I could write a rap instead of an essay. And this was a very kind of elderly, distinguished, teacher. And he crossed his arms and he looked at me and he said, "Will it be good?" And I said, "Yes, I will make this rap good." And he said, "Will you use quotes?" And I said, "Yes, I will use quotes." And he said, "Will you cite your sources?" And I said, "Yes, I will cite my sources." And then finally he said, "Good luck." So I wrote a rap essay on the philosophy text Plato's Republic. I think the opening lines were something like, "Plato's Republic, books 2 and 3. He banished all the poets, but he couldn't banish me." And I ended up getting an A on the rap essay. And so I thought, wait a second. You mean school doesn't have to be boring? Like, I can just write raps instead of essays? So, I tried my luck. Sometimes I got shot down. But often they would say, well, you can't write a rap, but you can write, about rap in your essay. Like, the poetry of Emily Dickinson compared to some rap lyrics. And I was like, of Lil Wayne? My teacher would be like, "Lil who?" I'm like, "Don't worry, it'll be good, I promise." So I ended up, writing more and more essays all through high school and then college, and ended up receiving a scholarship called the Marshall Scholarship to do a master's and a PhD in England at the University of Kent in Canterbury. And the PhD, as you mentioned, was in global youth cultures and hip hop. So I looked at how young people around the world use hip hop to form their identities and form communities. And thankfully, I've been able to incorporate that on the educational side as well as on the musical and performative side to create this body of work and this practice of bringing the growth mindset to schools across America.
Brilliant. It's just brilliant when you can blend music and education because it's so relatable to kids and especially, now you add hip hop and rap that, children who don't relate to some other forms of music are like, well, you're talking to me, man. I got this. So yeah, really, really
Thank
cool.
you.
And for you to figure out what works for you in the school system, right? Because otherwise you could have gone down the line of, "Ugh, I'm just so done with school. I never will go back to school, forget about college. No, this is not my route," right? But if you can make it like that you found the way to make it interesting for yourself in a way that it works for you. That is brilliant, really brilliant.
Thank you. And that's what I really want to bring to kids. There's a question my fellow motivational speaker, Joe Fingerhut, says all the time, which is, how can I? As this really powerful phrasing. And I always like to add, how can I make this fun? Whatever this is. How can I make school fun? How can I make chores fun? How can I make parenting fun? And I've often found that asking that question helps me feel more resourceful, because rather than be like, oh my gosh, parenting is exhausting, school is boring, chores are terrible, I'm like, okay, sometimes, but what if I can take ownership and responsibility over my own experience and find a way to make it work for me, to be fun for me? And so, yeah, hip hop has been a great avenue. And for students, one of the things I first did actually in high school as a senior honors project was to create hip hop based U.S. history study guides. Now, this is about 15 years before Hamilton came out, so I was a little predating Lin-Manuel Miranda, who thankfully actually got to perform with him briefly in New York. He was doing a show called Freestyle Love Supreme, and they basically did an hour-long improv hip-hop show, and I just been on America's Got Talent, and he pulled me up on stage, and I got to rap with him, so he is one of the nicest people. But all that to say, I was creating these U.S. history study guides. I was like, the kids can't remember any dates, anyone who created anything, any of these, historical facts, but they know all the lyrics to all the rap songs. And so I started creating rap songs to, bring like the Industrial Revolution or the Vietnam era to U.S. history. And that was how the whole thing got started on the academic side.
I can still remembering my art history. I took a 400 like elective class my senior year in art history, and it was so over my head that I started learning like the things. I put it to the age of Aquarius, but it was like the age of Pericles, and that's what I remembered stupid things, and I still remember today. So there you have it.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing, Christina. It's actually, and the focus of the honors thesis was on mnemonics. To your point, like, how do we remember things, and how can we create systems that help us remember it more easily? And music is one of the best ones, because our minds and our bodies both respond so emotionally to music that it's a great tool. I love that you use that as well.
Yeah, it worked well for me. I got to be in the class, so
Congratulations.
made me quite
Well,
happy.
uh, and school is not like school is a system that doesn't work for a lot of children, right? That having to sit down, that having to focus, that it's not like children are not made that way. They need to move, they need to, but it's counter human nature in a way, right? So to bring other aspects in it, like bring play in it. Well, play makes you learn easier anyway, but to bring play into it is just so like what would be possible if we would bring that into every aspect of school, right? That,
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons I'm grateful to do professional development work with teachers, is to help them, exactly what you're saying, Martina, bring more of the element of play, of fun, of creativity. A lot of things that I do in my assemblies with the students, I teach the teachers how to use call and response, how to, complete the phrase. Just things that get student voice in the classroom more and activate their attention, their focus, and helps them embody the material, not just memorize or attempt to memorize the material. And something you said too, I want to highlight, Martina, which is that, so, school doesn't work for a lot of students. And I think that's true. And also, I have a lot of compassion for educators, for administrators, for the whole system, because what I think school is trying to do a lot of things at once, right? School is trying to educate students for potential careers, or, it's also trying to teach them life skills. It's also trying to socialize them. It's also a form of childcare so that families, parents and caretakers can go to work. It also is behavioral management for students who have challenges. And then, layered on top of that, all the different student needs. I know, Martina, you mentioned, having a child yourself who has different needs as well. And so, you know, having a classroom full of 20 to 30 kids, and being one teacher, or maybe you get a teacher and a para like who can, support, but that's a lot to try to juggle. And then from the student perspective, yeah, how do you not get lost in that, right? How if you learn differently, if you have different needs, if you're on a different pace, whether that's you're learning at a more accelerated level and this is feeling kind of boring, or actually you did not get some of these skills earlier and this is all a huge struggle. It's really hard to do differentiation in those different spaces. So I have so much compassion, and I think so many assessments of education tend to point to the failings. And I think there's a lot that can be improved. And part of that is by first acknowledging all the different hats that education is trying to wear in our society. And really, it's one of the last third spaces. That's the other piece, is that with so much being online, so much being in phones, just fewer socializations, whether it's community organizations or religious organizations, that school is one of the last mixing pots in our country where everyone, or almost everyone, tends to get together from different cultural backgrounds, life experiences, socioeconomic backgrounds. And so it's a beautiful place, and I'm so grateful to be part of that community. And also, yeah, I appreciate the nuances of all the work that is to be done and all the work that is being done as well.
Yeah, I mean, just including you in the process is things moving in a different direction. So, and not every school has someone like you, so there's still a
Totally.
gap there, right? So,
Yeah,
but still beautiful. I'm gonna change it up a little here.
let's
Tell
do
us
it.
about the time you took a chance for love. And it doesn't have to be romantic love, but it can be romantic love.
Sure. Um, Yeah, well, I'll start with romantic love, and then I can expand to some other worldly love. Um, so my wife and I were friends from freshman year of college. We both went to Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Most people don't know Wake Forest, except maybe they know Tim Duncan or Chris Paul, who are basketball players. But
Or
uh,
they watched the movie. What is it? The Longest Ride?
oh yeah,
It's in
yep.
that movie. Yes.
So yes, a few reference points maybe that people have. A small, it's a small liberal arts school, and we were in a Spanish class together. And neither of us remembered this until senior year when I was cleaning out some of my papers, but we actually wrote a love poem in Spanish, very questionable grammar, of course, but about an island of love, and that sort of later became one of our inside jokes, like Isle of View, like an Isle of View, like seeing the other person, but also I love you, I love you, right? And so anyway, we were friends through college. We both were dating other people, and then second semester senior year, the best time to start a relationship, of course, right before you're about to both launch out into the world, we started dating. And she promptly went to Panama to do Peace Corps for 2 years, and I was in England working on my master's and PhD. And then she went to Spain to do a Fulbright scholarship in Madrid, and I was in England working on my PhD. And then she went to New York at NYU Law, and I was still in England doing my PhD. So we had 4.5 years of long distance. And one of the things, speaking of taking a chance of love, that I think was really important was we recognized we had limited time together, limited physical time together, limited phone time, because she didn't have a phone for the first 4 months. She had to use a payphone in the village that she was staying in, which a cow ran into it a couple months into her stay and knocked out the knocked out the phone service. So then she had to take a bus 45 minutes just to use a phone. So given that we had limited time together, one of the decisions that we made very early on is we're only going to talk about the things that matter. We're not going to create drama about who's doing what, how often are we talking, you said this, you said that, you didn't say this, blah, blah. Like, we're like, we don't want any of that to be part of our relationship. I'll acknowledge we're both a little conflict avoidant too, so that probably helped a little bit. But one of the things that it did as a practice was it just focused our relationship on what really mattered, which was creating a life together, sharing adventures together, just the beautiful moments. And because they were so few and far between, when we finally did get to live together in New York, we just kept that practice going and had the opportunity to create this wild, amazing life together. And so I think often, ironically, constant access when people are starting relationships sometimes creates more conflict maybe than might otherwise happen, because there's so many little things you start noticing about the other person, or so many opportunities for an interaction that doesn't quite feel right. And obviously I'm a big fan of repair, processing, all those things that I think are healthy in a relationship. But I think to make them the center point of the relationship is just asking the relationship to sort of turn in on itself and become this sort of downward spiral. So I'll pause there, but I think that was the really first, most significant romantic chance on love I took early on.
And you
Yeah.
chose. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
love what you said about that you really chose to only talk about the stuff that matters, and how that really then became the practice that you, because I truly believe that our the worst things we do is we focus on the things we don't like about the people around us, right? And what doesn't work in the situation, instead of focusing on what we love about it. And that's always like when I have someone around me complaining, especially clients at work, and I'm like, okay, now let's get back to what you love about that person. Can you get back to what you love about that person? Because I'm sure it's way more than this little thing you're arguing about at the moment. So I think that's such a lovely takeaway from your love story, is if we could all focus on what we love about the people in our lives. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and the other, chance on love, I'll say, was the career. I just pro bono for 9 years volunteered to speak in schools, because schools would call me up and say, Blake, you're into hip hop and education. Our kids love music and they're not always into education. So can you come and connect the two? And so I just started speaking to a classroom or a grade level or sometimes a whole school. And about 9 years ago, a principal pulled me aside and said, Blake, you're really good at this. I want to pay you because you should do this more. I was like, I didn't know you get paid to talk to kids. That's awesome. Thank you. And sure enough, there's like a small group of people who professionally, full time, are youth motivational speakers or youth speakers. Sometimes I don't like the term motivational. But I ended up trying to build this business, and it was really hard for a long time. Like, I had not done it professionally before, even though I had a lot of pro bono experience. And so I enrolled in a program called Youth Speaker University, led by Josh Shipp, who's an amazing youth speaker. And it was great. It was like the business and art of speaking. And so I was like, I need to learn these skills. And then I realized I didn't have any sales training, and I didn't like the sort of traditional, like, hard selling. And I found a program called Thrive Academy that focused on heart selling. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, you can just make an offer and an invitation to someone, and if it feels aligned, they say yes. And if it doesn't feel aligned, you can refer them to other resources that might support them. Like, that's how I wanted to do sales, absolutely. And after, doing this training, I started trying to make it a career, but it was really difficult. And I would, have maybe 10 presentations booked, but then I'd run out of money and I'd go work a consulting job for 9 months. And then, like, I'd build up enough savings to try to do it again. And I'd make it 6 months this time or 9 months, and then I'd run out of money. And I'd go and work consulting again or take another job. And so it was this cycle. And finally, I remember, like, I was sort of at the end of one of those cycles. It was in 2016. And I was like, I had $800 left in the business bank account. And I was like, okay, you know what? If I can just book 6 more presentations, like, I think I'll be able to make this more consistent. And so I was doing superhero assemblies at the time. And I was doing it at a school in Fremont, California, in the Bay Area, called Olivera. And the principal, after my superhero assembly, pulled me aside. He said, Blake, like, that was great. The kids loved it. The teacher said it was amazing. And that part about the growth mindset you talked about, that's actually our school district's priority for the year. And if you email all the other principals in the district, tell them not that you have a superhero assembly, but the growth mindset assembly, I bet 6 of them will say yes. So sure enough, I said, thanks, Ian. I emailed the rest of the principals in the district, and sure enough, 6 said yes. And I thought, oh, sometimes the words we use make all the difference. And so I stopped doing superhero assemblies. I started doing growth mindset assemblies. And from there, 2017 onward, I was able to do it full time. I have an amazing team now who supports me on the logistics. But yeah, it was a wild journey. And talk about taking a chance on love. Like, the consulting work was great. I loved helping get kids school supplies and nutritious food and personal care items, which was part of the work I was doing with a nonprofit. But I miss the personal connection that, like, seeing the kids' eyes light up when they think, oh, we're going to get lectured at in an assembly, but instead we're beatboxing, we're rapping. Like, this is amazing. So that was a big professional chance on love that I'm really grateful now is what I get to do.
Mm, so powerful.
Thank you.
And I love that, it was just inside of talking to the principal and him just shifting that one little, here's what the principals want you to focus on, right? And it's the same program, but just shift how you sell it and it's different. I got last week we were talking to another guest and he mentioned how he was struggling with the word balance. And that when a coach suggested he work on being centered, it was like all the difference in the world for him. And it was for me, I thought about this for days because I was like, whoa, like how interesting how like for me, because then like the coach said, picture yourself like, on a surfboard and I'm like, but that's still balance. But it didn't matter for him, it shifted because balance didn't work, centered worked. And it's been like swirling in my head about how we think we're talking the same language to people, but often we're still not like you hear balance, I hear balance, and we think it means the same, but it's not quite the same. And I don't know, sorry, little thing about words
Yeah.
though that
Well, if I could speak to that, actually, the one idea about balance that changed my life is balance is a dynamic motion. Balance is not you're down the center the whole time. Balance is you swing this way, but before you fall off, you swing back this way. And then you swing this way. And especially with parenting, which I appreciate you bringing up at the beginning. And I know, Martina, you do a lot of coaching around parenting as well. Like that in my mind, like parenting is a dynamic motion, right? Like balance for me is like I am there with my child all weekend, and it is both the most beautiful and challenging thing. I have a almost 4 year old. She turns four in 2 days. And, I gotta be real, it is emotionally exhausting. Like toddlerhood, and I know kids are different, but like my daughter, from the time she wakes up, it might be 5:30 or 6 in the morning, depending on the day, to when she finally collapses after the 15th story of the evening. We're like, okay, you just have to close your eyes now. At 9 p.m. Like that is a long day, and I'm super grateful that my wife is an amazing partner in that, and especially at these ages, mama is very much still, at least for her, the one of the main focal points for her. But there are moments when my child is dysregulated and she's screaming in my face, and I'm trying to be the cloud, as they say, like let it just go through you, right? But it's hard, and as so I learned the term highly sensitive person, like a HSP, and I'm like, oh yeah, that definitely, like that stuff affects me, and so afterwards I might need an hour to recharge. And so I bring all that up in the context of balance because I think sometimes a weekend of parenting puts me all the way over here. Like I feel way like on the edge of my emotional regulation, and then during the work day it comes back and I feel like much more over here and I'm in that kind of professional mode. But then my child comes back in, and sometimes it takes me a little time to get back to the center where I'm like, man, I just had so much autonomy. I was feeling so accomplished today on the work front. And then I come home and it's just like, trying to corral a tornado. So I think that's a very like humbling experience as a parent, but also reminds me that balance is that dynamic motion.
yeah, yeah, really beautiful.
It's fascinating because like what I tell my clients is like we go to school for almost everything, but there's no school for how to be a parent, right? And it's I literally my course is a parent course. It will inform the parenting, but it's about the parent because it's all our work, right? It's like, oh God, it's like a stab in the heart if your child is screaming, right? And then it becomes personal, and then it's like, what did I do? Like there's like all our stuff comes up with that, right? So it's a I always talk about, my children when they were in their teenagers. and they're all, grown now. It was just like putting the imaginary duct tape on and taking deep breath. And it's like, okay, so what are you going to do about it rather than come in full force and tell them what they need to do? So, but I love the word growth mindset because it's, everybody's talking about emotional education and what the heck is emotional education, right? And in a way, growth mindset is the same thing. It's like we have to, like for us to evolve, we need that, right? We need to have that mindset. And usually we have growth mindset kind of in one area, but not in all of them, right?
Yeah.
It's like not in the emotional aspect mostly, right? Because we learned what we learned when we learned it, and then it just continues, right? Whether it's from our parents or society or whatever, right? And if we don't evolve, we get stale, but our relationships get stale, our life gets stale. It all gets a little heavy and sluggish, and unless we have that growth mindset and are willing to look at willing and question, willing to look at and question everything, right? So, but let me ask you, so what made you who you are today? Like you shared a little bit about growing up. Like what made you who you are today? For example, what was your biggest challenge, or what took most courage? Or when did you stand up for something that mattered to you? And yes, you talked about standing up for your business and really making that work, but is there something earlier there?
For sure. I think, being bullied a fair amount growing up was really impactful because, again, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to love people. I wanted to create cool things. And just to see how threatening that was to some people, or, just how they saw that as an opportunity to release some of their pent up frustration or anger or resentment or whatever, was going on for them. And as a kid, to your point about not having emotional education, like I was like, oh, this is just the way the world is, I guess. You just gotta dodge and hide and try not to get targeted. Which we can bring gender into that a little bit, considering some of the context of this podcast in particular, which is that every single person who has ever physically hurt me was a male-bodied person, like whether it was kids, pushing me down, throwing me into walls, dragging me into the ocean. Like, there were plenty of, all the way through college. The last time I was, physically assaulted was my senior year of college. And so, I say thankfully, like the last time, but like, that it, from a nervous system perspective, I think it just brings a sense of hypervigilance, right? Including me being a male bodied person. Like, I see guys and, I immediate threat assessment, right? Like, that is just my default from those early formative years. And, it plays into interesting ways even in my work, and I'll share something kind of vulnerable about this, which is that, you know so I'm often speaking to like 500 to 1,000 students at a time, right? It could be elementary, middle, high school. I do about 70% elementary, and then 15% high school, 15% middle school, and like a little bit of college and corporate as well. But, a lot of what I'm doing is working with students in schools and en masse. And so there's a couple things I have noticed because I have a sample size of over 500,000 students, right? Um, One of them is how can I show up in a space as a facilitator, as a speaker, as a leader in that context of being in an assembly, that doesn't make assumptions about the people I'm speaking with, right? So, for example, if I'm calling on someone in the audience, I never say, "Oh yeah, the boy in the back," right? I'll say, "Oh yeah, you in the back with the black hair and the blue shirt," right? I'll just use like a descriptor. Um, or yes, with the glasses in the front, right? And so I'm always careful not to assume anything about the people I'm speaking to, which I think is one of the beautiful opportunities to let people reveal themselves to us, right? Is like if I let you give you the space to be who you are and to show me, then I can honor you for who you actually are and not who I project or imagine you might be. So that's one piece, is I try to just have that blanket thing. And developmentally, I have found that, middle schoolers especially, they're in a place of identity formation, part of which is peer acceptance, right? So I got to look cool for my friends. And, like a white dude rapping at an assembly is a great opportunity for us to look a little too cool for it sometimes, usually until the first like four lines, and they're like, oh, yo, bro's got bars, like this is actually good. So but I see the skepticism and I'm prepared for that, right? But when I'm calling on student volunteers to come up on stage, what I have noticed is that middle school, male-bodied individuals or boys, I'm always a little like the language feels difficult, but like I'll say male-bodied because I don't want to assume gender identity when I look at them, but like they are presenting as males in that space. So, just for some people are familiar with the language, some people aren't. That's just wanted to like explain that a little bit why I say that. But yeah, so if I call on middle school boys to come up on stage, what I found very early on in my career is that 70% of them could not resist the opportunity to make it a joke, but not in like a funny way, but like in a they are not doing what I'm asking them to do, or they're trying to subvert it in certain ways. And so what I started doing was just in middle schools, almost exclusively calling on female-bodied volunteers. And the reason is the point of the exercise is to get us to the next thing. It's not to have an exploration of gender, right? So I just need someone who is willing to help me write on a whiteboard for 2 minutes. Like that's all I really need. And I don't need to make some weird power conflict part of the experience when I only have 30 to 45 minutes because maybe we started 10 minutes late. So there are little things like that that I start to notice over time in this work. And, I share that. It feels a little vulnerable to share that because I think that could maybe be misinterpreted. But it's like, I love working with middle schoolers of all orientations. Like I don't care, but it's just if you start to see so many patterns in a certain area, I just think, okay, how can I acknowledge the observation that I'm having without drawing bigger conclusions? So I don't say middle school boys are a problem. Middle school boys can't be trusted. I'm just like, it is developmentally appropriate for them to want to mess with an authority figure and to want to look cool and be goofy in front of their friends, especially if they can do it in front of the whole school. So yeah, I'll pause there, but that's just like something that I thought was relevant to that part of the conversation.
It's great, but also on the flip side, you need to keep on time, and young middle school girls or presenting girls are more apt to want to please you and make you happy and do what you're asking of them. And so to keep on track, you have a better shot of getting it to go your way if you have a girl come up and do that piece of the assembly. So I get it. And that's pretty brilliant.
Thank you. Well, and it's interesting too to notice how boys, I'll just say boys and girls but you get the presenting part, in the audience also respond to parts of my talk. So boys will often be goofing around or messing around with each other as a way often when it starts to get vulnerable. So they like physically are trying to escape some of the vulnerability, whereas I find often the girls will just be like trying to have a side conversation when it starts to get vulnerable, and not like messing with each other, but just like distraction. Like that's their sort of escape mechanism. And I always balance the vulnerability in middle school and high school. So I talk about my mental health struggles. When I was in middle school and high school, struggled a lot with depression, with anxiety, and it's vulnerable and it can be activating for some students who are also going through it. And I'm really careful to present it in a way that I think they can relate to, but is not too detailed or too graphic that it would be actually sort of triggering for someone from like a somatic experience. And afterwards, I'm really grateful that a lot of students do come up and say, I'm actually struggling with a lot of the stuff you talked about in your presentation. And one of the first things I ask them is like, what kind of help and support do you have right now? Because when kids come up to me and they're describing how they are suicidal or who they've been suicidal, one of my first things is like, I don't want to bring this up and then leave without them having the support they need to be able to process that and receive professional care. So it is very vulnerable, and I do notice how kids of different genders do tend to respond differently to certain parts. It's interesting your point about the pleasing. Yeah, I think a lot of girls get socialized into that very early, right? And I'm doing my best with my own daughter. I don't think she ever actively tries to please me about anything. We're still very much in the phase that like active resistance is her favorite mode of interaction, to the point where I just reverse psychology of like, you're not allowed to brush your teeth, you're not allowed to take a bath, like you're not allowed to get in the car to go to school, and it's the number one guaranteed way to make her run to do whatever it is.
Brilliant. So brilliant. All right. Last question. If you had a magic wand and could give people any quality, what would it be and why?
Ooh. I'm going to pause for a moment to reflect on that question. And I think that pause gave me the answer I was looking for. Because I think slowing down is one of the most powerful tools we can use. And I know, as Reiki practitioners and people, I know you are very much deep into the energetics of slowing down. But if I could give anyone, wave a magic wand, give anyone a tool, it would be, in any given situation, especially challenging situations, to be able to slow down enough to ask the question, what else could this mean? This person is annoying me. I'm like, oh, they're just driving me crazy. Like, they must want to make my life miserable. Slow down. What else could this mean? Oh, maybe they're really tired. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're uncomfortable. Right? This person's not responding to me. I've sent them 3 emails. I've texted them 12 times. Thanks for your patience on the booking of this conversation, by the way. What else could this mean, right? Oh, wow, maybe they're moving houses. Maybe they're having a really challenging parenting time. Maybe they're on tour for their work or traveling. I think so often the suffering that I create for myself, and I know many of us tend to create for ourselves, is we attach ourselves immediately to one interpretation of a situation, and usually it's like the most negative possible version of it, right? It's like people don't like us, or they're not respecting us, or they don't care about us, and just to take a pause and ask, what else could this mean? It just gives us more options.
Yeah. So brilliant. So I have a good example of that. Like, how sometimes people go, I know they meant that because of the look on their face. To which I go, maybe they had gas. It always just starts cracking up laughing because it's just that silly, right? We think we know what they mean because of the look on their face. It's so stupid, right? Like, yeah,
I
good
love
stuff.
that. Yeah, exactly. We can't know, and we can ask. And even if we ask, sometimes it's too vulnerable for people to tell us the truth. So,
Yeah.
what else could this mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we make up shit all the time, right? We,
Oh yeah.
we really make up shit all the time, right? And like Christina is her version. My version is, well, if somebody is upset with you or yells at you, maybe their shoes are too tight.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? Maybe they have a toothache. We don't know, right? We just make up stuff and make it, as you said, make it mean something about us rather than about them, right? We're probably not even on their radar most of the time. So
Yeah. I did a 52-week, so year-long motivational rap series where I wrote like a blog post and then did a rap about it. It's called The Upbeat, and it one of them was called The Radar, and it's exactly what you said, Martina. It's like we are just a blip on everyone's radar, and it's freeing in many ways. Like one would go, oh, they don't care about me. And it's like they're not even really thinking about you.
no, they're not.
Yeah, it's a lot to be human, to be a subjective consciousness in a electromagnetic body. Like, that's pretty wild.
And I'm like, I have enough going on in my world as to care about what's going on in yours sometimes. Like keeping track of my life is big enough
Yeah.
than to, go over there and deal with that. So yes. So thank you so much. So why don't you tell us about your business, how people can find you? It's all going to be in the notes,
Great.
but just tell our listeners.
Sure thing. So my name is Blake and I speak. So it's blakespeaks.com. And on there is all my work at schools. If anyone listening, has a child at a school, is a teacher or an administrator, or knows a school in your area you think would benefit, please feel free to reach out to me on there. It's just Blake at blakespeaks.com. And on there also is all my music. So I do create hip hop music, and maybe as we wrap up, we can wrap up literally and figuratively with a little improvised rap for you. So I've recorded several albums. My most recent is called Remix Your Reality. And that's all available for free, to listen to on the website. And then I also have 3 children's books. And the 4th one is about to come out, probably by the time this airs, may very well have come out. It's called The Unmagical Unicorn. And they're all growth mindset themed children's books because my wife and I read so many let's say uninspired or uninspiring children's books to our child that we're like, we could write a better book than this. And so sometimes if you're annoyed with enough things in the world, you just go and do a better version of it from your perspective. So that's what we did. And yeah, thankfully the books have been really well received. A lot of school districts get the books for all their kids, which makes me so happy. Just like to be able to spread literacy and also the growth mindset message through fun rhyming books. Kids rap along with them, and yeah, those are some things on there at blakespeaks.com.
That is so cool. I mean, I've always looked for, better books, right? And most of the times it's like, okay, well, this is really so boring, right? And most of them are, and some of them are brilliant, and there's a lot out there that is not so great. So Blake, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you. Lots of nuggets, lots of nuggets to take with. And for all of you out there, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you love this, please leave us a review. Please share. Remember that all the information about Blake is going to be in the notes. Christina's and my Linktree profile is going to be in the notes as well. And please remember that you are extraordinary, that you rock. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone. And Blake, take it away.
All right. So we'll do a little improvised final freestyle here. I'm just going to put on an instrumental. I could cook up the whole beat live, but just as a sort of spirit of just wrapping up, we won't do the whole production. But I'll just do a little freestyle about some of the stuff we talked about today. So let's see here. All right. Can you hear that beat okay on your end? All right. Drop. Yo. Check. Yeah. Yo. Okay. Yo. Check it. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. Yo, I'm gonna begin at the end. We got everyday, ordinary, extraordinary men. When I'm rapping like that, I'm a dreamer. Yo, I came here to talk with Martina and Christina. Yo, we don't stop though. Yeah, it's Blake B. They are angels doing the Reiki. Yeah, and when I kick it, I'm gonna say that we gotta bring our growth mindset every day. Cause I don't sweat, and no, I don't flex. I talk about that power of yet. And yeah, we don't stop. We keep it going. Ask what else could this mean, and keep it flowing. We keep it going. Balance is dynamic. What you got to do when you panic. You take that deep breath and you re-regulate. And now you're expansive in that state. So I'm feeling great. My people, I went to wait. Cause I wake up a forest and communicate. Yeah, nowadays I be rapping in schools. But back in the day, I definitely was not cool. But nowadays we in the studio. I speak it so real and truly though. Yes, I got to say thanks, peace and love, Dr. Blake. Have a nice day. Let's go. Boom. I will do Zoom emojis all day. Lots of love. Take care.